Oh, hey, Dead Island 2, you look nice today. That's some rockin' zombie gore you've got there. Look at how the brains splatter. Oh wow, you're funny too. I love that.
We are going to be so famous when this goes live.
So what are your thoughts on how to make melee combat interesting in the long term, or like how to tell a good story? Oh. Okay. Oh, what are my plans on Saturday? Actually, I have to wash my hair. On one hand, Dambuster Studios has delivered a charming and hilarious apocalyptic sequel to the 2011 original that's littered with great one-liners and dismembered body parts in equal measure.
Mikasa is your casa.
But aside from its balls-to-the-wall silliness and considerable comedy chops, there just isn't much to it that hasn't been done better in a dozen other zombie-filled games since the original Dead Island came out more than a decade ago, including and especially Dying Light 1 and 2, which notably were made by Techland, the studio that created Dead Island. Even though it lacks originality, Dead Island 2 still competently executes on its over-the-top LA-based zombie parody and injects some much-needed Botox into a series that's been languishing for far too long, making Hollywood's red carpets even redder by applying generous helpings of gore was laugh-out-loud funny and time generally well spent. This is a lighthearted first-person action game where committing unspeakable acts of violence against the zombie hordes of Hell A is the most mundane thing about it. After choosing one of 6 virus-resistant playable characters aboard a failed plane evacuation, you're thrown gore-first into the ridiculous streets of Southern California, where absolutely no one seems to be taking the apocalypse seriously.
So, all these explosions and fun, you're filming it?
Yep.
Alone or with up to 2 co-op pals, you'll dropkick and disembowel your way through a cattle call of the undead over the course of this 30-hour adventure, during which you'll meet a bevy of larger-than-life quest givers that include this drug-addled rock star.
Sorry, man. Big evacuation party, you know. Oh, shit! We gotta get to the evac!
And this geriatric former movie star who gets his fashion tips from Hugh Hefner. Like a cheesy B-movie, the story makes so little effort to produce anything approaching coherence that the attempt itself may in fact be sarcastic, and that fits in quite nicely with the absurdist tone of an adventure where some zombies have hives of aggressive bees stuck in their torsos. What few twists and turns exist in this familiar apocalyptic tale aren't terribly surprising or interesting, and that highlights one of the many ways Dead Island 2 feels like a game I've played several times before. The good news is, although it lacks storytelling substance, that meandering odyssey at least has some very funny writing and memorable characters throughout. And the fact that both are completely unhinged works to Dead Island 2's advantage.
You like horror movies?
I did.
One chapter had me searching for a squeamish assistant on the set of a horror movie, featuring a giant acid-spitting mechanical spider, while this side quest had me slaying zombies in creative ways for the benefit of a social media influencer looking to boost her clout. The numerous ways in which the developers expertly poke fun at the stereotypical vanity and vapidness of the Los Angeles setting is reminiscent of Grand Theft Auto V's Los Santos in the best kind of way. Great writing is helped along by high-quality voice performances as you recklessly charge your way through whatever preposterous hijinks before you, and that's hands down the best part of Dead Island 2.
Someone didn't want anybody or anything to get out.
If you've ever braved a virtual zombie apocalypse before, then you'll be quite familiar with the combat formula that this cheeky iteration sticks quite close to. You start with basic melee weapons like baseball bats and hammers before crafting more elaborate tools of destruction, like an electric katana or the demon love child of a sledgehammer and a flamethrower, and eventually guns too. But while the more eccentric melee options have interesting designs, in practice they don't feel much different than their unmodded peers, aside from applying various status effects, so they aren't as exciting as they look. The melee creations at your disposal are also far less original and crazy than the kinds of bonkers weapons we get to play with in the Dead Rising series. You definitely won't be seeing any umbrella lasers or sledgehammers with grenades duct taped to them, for example. Because of that, the novelty with Dead Island 2's by-the-numbers close-quarters combat wears thin quite quickly. Despite how they look and how they sound on paper, there's simply a lack of variety in the way the available tools of destruction work. And the fact that fighting against this zombie horde is about as challenging as whacking a T-ball off a stand. You can only slice a brain eater in half so many times before the monotony sets in, and you start to feel as jaded as Woody Harrelson in Zombieland. And there aren't enough late-game changes to inject any kind of variety into the mix. Multiplayer is the best remedy for staving off repetition, since it's a laughing riot when friends are there to help you drop-kick enemies off of rooftops. One thing that took some tension out of it, though, is that alone or as a team, failure becomes an increasingly rare occurrence. You unlock ample tools to keep yourself standing atop the pile of undead corpses instead of being swallowed beneath it, but the threats don't keep pace and there aren't any difficulty options to up the challenge. For example, it's crazy that a perfectly timed dodge or parry, both of which have a very generous window, makes you invulnerable as you execute the offending zombie, restoring a good chunk of health in the process, if you've got the right skill equipped. As a result, I never felt like I was in any kind of danger. There's nothing actively awful about getting up close and personal against the undead, but I definitely felt blasé about my title as the Los Angeles area's newly appointed king of extreme plastic surgery after only a couple hours. Matters are made worse with the introduction of ranged weapons, which feel sloppy, inaccurate, and don't benefit from most of the melee-focused skills and upgrades. Guns almost feel like an afterthought that was tacked onto the sandbox at the last minute, but never tuned to feel good. Not only are firearms rarely the most effective method for mowing down zombies, but ammo is extremely limited, and firing them never satisfies. Beyond that, the steady stream of zombies coming at you from all directions means you rarely find yourself in a situation where you're able to fire on the enemy before getting interrupted by a QuickTime event to shove a pushy zombie away, which forces you back into melee. Also, owing to my time parkouring around Villador and Dying Light 2 just last year, movement during combat in Dead Island 2 feels downright sluggish by comparison. One of the things that keeps combat fresh is a steady stream of passive perks and active abilities that unlock as you progress through side quests and stories. By the end, a wide variety of options are available to customize your character to fit the playstyle you favor, which in my case was optimizing my attack speed to be ultra fast and making counterattacks following perfect parries as devastating as possible. There's even character-specific options that play to their particular strengths. If you want to get extra weird, you also gain access to superhuman powers like a powerful AoE ground pound or the ability to enter a frenzied rage and tear zombies apart with your bare hands. Though these powers have cooldowns and mostly serve as a way to break up the otherwise conventional hacking and slashing, it does go a long way to making repetitive combat encounters more interesting. In addition to the bugs that creep out of torso-mounted beehives, Dead Island 2 is also host to a variety of less amusing technical bugs. It was nothing game-breaking, but I saw people sink into the ground during cutscenes.
Hey, I told you to stay off that foot. You want me to cut it off? Come on.
Captions that lied about who was speaking, and plenty of other unintentional silliness. Multiplayer makes a somewhat buggy game even more unpredictable by introducing lag, disappearing characters, and a whole host of other issues. Usually these things just make the already rowdy streets of Hollywood even more ridiculous, and hardly get in the way of having a good time, but it does give Dead Island 2 a somewhat unpolished feel.
Hello, riffraff.
Dead Island 2 is a hysterical Los Angeles-infused satire that does most things well enough, but feels like a stroll down the Walk of Fame of celebrated zombie games I've already played, without adding many new ideas of its own. In fact, aside from the stellar comedy bits, I can think of very few things that Dead Island 2 does better than last year's Dying Light 2. Still, if you've ever wanted to put your Wolverine claws straight through a zombie's face or knock someone's head off with a golf club, Dead Island 2's got you. Its blood-soaked melee combat and memorable characters are a lot of fun, especially when accompanied by friends in co-op multiplayer. The somewhat generic crafting weapons and upgrading your skills as you lay waste to armies of spray-tanned undead is entertaining enough on its own. But the strong writing and completely irreverent tone are the true stars of the show. For more, check out our reviews of Sherlock Holmes The Awakened and Mighty Doom. And for everything else, stick with IGN.